Once again, a very warm welcome to the Academy of Law. Before we begin and introduce our speaker, a reminder to please ensure during the call that your camera is turned off and you mute yourself. Please engage with us by going to www.menti.com. The code is 9840687. The format of our Wisdom Wednesday will be a 30 minutes presentation, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Please post your questions in the chat function. We're gonna be generating a conversation from your topic just after the presentation. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this morning, Tim Halse. Tim Halse is a trained actor who has owned and ran a drama school for the last 9 years. He specializes in assisting people with their confidence and communication skills. Before this, he had 15 years experience as a sales manager in the UK. This has given him an just before we start, let everybody know that the session will be recorded, then the video notes of the session will be emailed to you after the session. Thank you for joining us. Can I please ask Tim Halse to take it from here?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So, as Thabo says, my name is Tim, and I'm going to be taking you through some processes of how to stand out from the crowd and get the job of your dreams. That's the idea. First thing I'd like to say is nothing today is going to be absolutely groundbreaking. What we want to do today is really give everybody a good grounding of how to do the basics properly. I was a manager for a lot of years, and I saw a lot of mistakes on people's CVs and a lot of things that people did in interviews that were a bit weird. So really, it's just about making sure that everybody understands the basics and gives yourselves the biggest chance to maximize your opportunity for them. Now, I know that everybody's going to be in different positions. Some of you will already be working. Some of you will be looking for jobs. But this is all stuff that you can keep in your back pocket and have when you need it. So we're going to be looking at 4 main areas. We're going to be looking at the CV and how to put together a good CV that has everything on it that you need. We're going to be looking at job seeking and how's the best way to plan that and to go about actually finding the job that you need. Some interviewing techniques, things not to do and things to do during the interviewing process. And finally, what would be considered, I suppose, my specialist subject, we're going to look a little bit on confidence. Again, it's not something we can teach in a half-an-hour webinar, but again, it's just something we can have a quick look at now and take it from there. Good. Me and Thabo need a secret. I'm not controlling the slides, so I need a secret way of moving the slides on with Thabo. There you go. You see, I'm just going to say slide every time I will need it. It's a cunning format. I'm sure it'll be seamless. So we're going to start with looking at our CV. As all of you know, this is going to be the first introduction that you have to either a recruitment agency or to the employer themselves. And a lot of decisions are going to be based on these 2 or 3 sheets of paper. Now, there's no 100%, this is definitely how you should do your CV, but there are certain things that we want to look at and make sure that we get right to make it easier for the recruiter to find what they're looking for and to give you the best chance of succeeding when you supply your CV to somebody. So we're going to be looking at the format, the structure, how the personal statement works, things like the education section, experience section, hobbies and interests, and references. Let's move to the next slide. I know you've been asked to do a poll as to how you put together your CV, and I see a lot of you that have done that have said that you know. So some of this may not be revelatory news to you, but even then, there might be something in here that you go, oh, I never thought of that. And for those of you who are not sure, this will be really helpful. Cool, let's go to the next slide. So, formatting the CV. Very simply, what does the CV look like? How is it put together? Where do you put things to make it easier for the recruiter to find what they're looking for? You've got to remember that a recruiter is getting, 100 CVs for every job opportunity. They don't want to have to sit and read every single word on that CV. They want an easily formatted CV that they can quickly scan, have a good idea of what where they need to go to find the relevant information that they need. And that's really the sort of most important thing. We're going to start with the most simple of basics. If we go to the next slide, always use a proper word processing. It sounds silly, but always use a proper word processing system, either Word or Google Docs. Most people will be using Word. I know it does sound obvious, but you'd be amazed at people, find these obscure word processing programs that no one can open, and then it just becomes annoying for the recruiter, and you're already off to a bad start. So always make sure you use either Word or Google Docs. Good, let's go to the next slide. And I'm not asking for any favors here. This is going to be sort of the overriding sense of today's webinar. And I originally thought that this stood for keep it simple, stupid, but I was told that that was rude, and there's actually another way of saying it. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see that it's actually keep it super simple, which is much nicer. And I can't emphasize this enough. The simpler you keep things, the easier it is for everybody that is going to be looking at your CV. If you make things overly complicated and add things that aren't necessary and put things in the wrong order, it's going to become a nightmare for whoever's wanting to look at your CV and find the information that they need. So keep it super simple. I don't want to call anybody stupid, so we'll just leave it at that. Good. Let's move on to the next couple of slides. There we go. Keep it super simple. Next slide. So, starting from the very foundations, fonts and colors. And again, we're going to immediately go back to the rule of keeping it simple. Use black for your main text and one other color for anything that you want to stand out, like maybe your name and job title, maybe your that each heading can be in a different color, but don't be going crazy with it. Again, you don't want to be giving the recruiter a headache with a crazy CV. They want to just be able to have a look at it, find what they're looking for, done. If we look at the next slide, you'll see an example of what not to do. So you can see that the colors are all a bit weird and the font is a bit harder to read, and this person probably thinks they're being very quirky and clever. Unfortunately, it's not. It just makes it very, very difficult to read and gives off the wrong impression. Whatever job you're going for, you want to be looking like all times. And you can see on this next one that I found, this CV is obviously for a graphic designer, so it's a bit different, but that just gives me a headache just looking at it. I wouldn't know where to start with that CV. And you can imagine that any recruiter getting this would just be, no, I'm just going to move on to the next one. So we want to try and keep our CVs very simple. Which brings us on to length. Now, obviously, this is going to be determined to a certain degree on how much experience and background knowledge you have. But again, the standard idea is that it shouldn't be more than 2 sides of A4 paper. You should be able to get everything that you need to get into 2 sides of A4. Anything longer than that, and to be honest with you, recruiters are just going to be, oh, this is ridiculous, it's too long. And we'll break down what to put on the CV in a minute. But if it's going over 2 sides of A4, then quite honestly, there's stuff you can cut out. When we get to the heading side of things, that's okay, we can move on to headings. And just wait for someone to mute themselves. And someone's unmuted on themselves, and it makes the noise a bit weird.
Can we all put ourselves on mute, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. Good. So headings, clear, concise. We don't want the recruiter to struggle to find what they're looking for. If they have a job that they know that they can't look at anybody unless they have a certain qualification, for example, they don't want to be scrolling through every CV looking for the education section. They want to be able to find it. So make sure your headings are clear, concise, and slightly bigger, obviously, than the rest of the text, thereby making it much easier for the recruiter to find what they're looking for. And again, this is where use of color can be used a little bit. You can change the color of the headings, as we spoke about earlier, keep it the same and keep it simple. Cool. Let's move on to the structure of the CV. And what I mean by that is, where do we put things and how much do we need to put in each section? So the first section we're going to look at is your name and contact details. The 3 things you need are obviously your full name, your location, a telephone number, an email, and your ID. The example doesn't have an ID on there, but you would need to put your ID. That's all. You shouldn't need to put anything else, unless you're going for a specific job, like as an actor, where you might need a photo. I know a lot of people like to have photos, but I've never understood why. It's not something that I think is necessary. So you certainly don't need your full address. If we just scroll through the next slides, please. You certainly don't need your full address. As long as it's got the area that you are in, that's absolutely fine. Again, you don't need your date of birth. If your ID is on there, then that has it on there anyway. You certainly don't need your marital status. And I don't think, as I said, you need a photo of yourself. There are other things that people put on their CVs that don't seem to bear any sort of relevance to me. Make sure that you always tailor your CV to the job you're going for. So obviously, if the job you're going for has driving involved, then it's worth putting things like full, clear driving license and what proficiency you're at. When it comes to the personal statement, so this is basically a few words just to sum up who you are and what you are about. Keep it brief. I've seen statements with nearly a full CVs with nearly a full page of A4 just for their professional profile. And quite honestly, these bits are only ever going to get read once you're further down the line in getting the job. The initial recruiter is not going to be reading through all of these. They're going to be looking for the flashpoints that they need to know. The education, the work experience. So if you start off with a 6-paragraph, 2,000-word essay about yourself, your CV is going to get put on the pile pretty quickly, on the do not contact pile pretty quickly. Keep it brief. Tailor it specifically to the job that you're looking for. So if you're looking for areas in different jobs, you might have a different professional profile for each job. And that's fine, because obviously you want to highlight what the recruiter is going to be looking for specifically for the job you're going for. Avoid using cliches. Don't say things like excellent team player or works well on their own. All those things are not relevant to anybody. Everybody's going to assume you're a good team player until they can see that you're not. It's just a waste of everybody's time putting sort of useless cliches on there. But make sure you sell yourself. If you've done something that's slightly unusual, or you have a particular qualification that might make you stand out, then here's a good place to put it. Obviously, you'll put it in other places as well, but here's a good place to catch people's eyes and make sure that you're putting yourself forward. Good, let's move to the education section. This is really important. This is what a lot of recruiters will jump to straight away. If they're looking for somebody who needs to have a degree in something, this is where you need to put it. And it needs to be concise and in reverse order. Your most recent qualification at the top, and then obviously going down in chronological order from when you got 3 of those. If you only have matric, that's absolutely fine, that's brilliant. Make sure if matric is your highest, you put down the subjects that you've got the matric in. That's going to be important for a lot of jobs. Obviously, if you've got a degree or a couple of degrees in other areas, then the subjects for your matric is not so important, because that's going to be what people are going to be focusing on. Also, always when you get new skills, make sure you add them to the CV. You're all here because one assumes you're doing something with Academy of York. Make sure that as soon as you've got that qualification, it goes down on your CV, and you've got the institution that you got it from is important. People look at that, and that makes a big difference to a lot of recruiters. Good. Core skills. So this is very much about bullet pointing things that you that is going to help sell you to the recruiter. So it's quite obvious things that you would do in your job. It's going to be different for every CV, because it's going to be CV specific and very job specific. But things like Microsoft Office Suite, if you have relevant computer skills in a specific program, it's incredibly important to highlight those. And if they are quite obscure programs, I would do that on a separate skills section. Do a separate computer skills section. So things like Pastel, Sage, QuickBooks, any sort of accounting software, any customer relation management tool, CRM tool like Goldmine or Oracle, things where it's going to save them time and effort teaching you if they can see you already have those skills on those computer programs. That's one of the things that is going to make you stand out a lot from the crowd. Cool. So we get to probably the most important bit, the career summary. So this is what's going to be looked at, and obviously people are going to invest a bit of time looking at this section. This should always be done again in reverse order, with your most recent job first, and then going back through the jobs that you've had throughout your career. Always start in bold with the simple facts: the time you were there, the company, and your job title. And it should be your last job title, because obviously some people will work through a company and have several job titles whilst they're there. Always go for your last job title, and you can mention the other job titles in your outline or key responsibilities area that will be coming up. If we move through the slides, a couple of slides. So after the facts about where you were working, we've gone right to the bottom. We've gone too fast. That's okay. An outline of your responsibilities. So this again is just a brief 3-sentence description of the main day-to-day stuff that you did. And again, this is just for someone who's in a rush. They just want to see what you did. They can see it in one concise, easily maintained piece of writing. Then you can be a bit more detailed in your key responsibilities and be detailed. Try and get as much down as possible. There might be something that you don't necessarily think is going to be important, like, I don't know, reordering stationery, for example, that you don't go down, but that actually is quite a big deal for the people who are looking for it. So make sure that you go through everything that you did that is important in your last job, and you make a decent bullet point list of all the things that you deem important. And then lastly, put something about your key achievements and anything that you have done that made you stand out during your work. So things like, you know, employee of the month. Obviously, if you happen to be getting that every month, it might just put was regularly employee of the month. Anything that you did to save the business money or make the business money. Make sure that you highlight that very specifically. Again, it can be very important. Let's move on to hobbies and interests. A lot of the time, you don't need to put anything for this. It's one of those things that is probably unnecessary. And really don't put things that have nothing to do with the job. So the example we've supplied here is you're applying for a web developer. You do not need to put that you enjoy fishing and playing football and watching TV. Everybody, you know, everybody has things that they enjoy. If it's not going to help you in the actual job that you are applying for, then there's very little point having it there. If, however, you do things like charity work, or in this example, you know, setting up networks or computer programming, then that might be something that you can include in this section if you genuinely do it as a hobby. But, you know, things like playing with my kids is not really a hobby or an interest that anyone's going to be interested in. Good. And finally, references. Always please make sure your references are available on request. The only time you don't need to do this is if you are currently unemployed and you know that you have the references, are happy to speak to whoever's going to contact them, then you can put them down. But a lot of us, we're looking for jobs whilst we're currently in a job, and you're at some point going to use the job you are in as a reference. So you do not want them to be called until, you know, you've warned them that they're going to be called. You always want to make sure that the recruitment agency or whoever you are applying to directly gets your permission to check your references before they do it, just so that you can make sure you give a heads up to whoever it is that's going to be giving you the reference, because you don't want to catch people by surprise. You know, oh, I didn't know I was looking for a new job. That's interesting. So again, always make sure it's just available on request, unless you're absolutely sure you're fine with those references being contacted whenever. Good. Okay, let's move on to actual job seeking. Let's start with recruitment agencies. That's how most of us, it's probably the easiest way to start. There are hundreds of recruitment agencies, I'm sure you're all aware. They are, they range from, you know, one person working from their home to mass companies that have offices all around the world. A couple of things you can do is make sure the recruitment company that you're using is a member of APSO, which is the Federation of African Professional Staffing Organizations. If they are a member of APSO, then you can be fairly sure that they're going to be a reputable agency that have been around for enough time not to do anything nefarious. Don't try to avoid using any sort of fly-by-night agencies. A way of telling this is if you're ever asked to pay for anything. So if they say you need to pay a fee for reformatting your CV or getting references, that is a telltale sign that you need to be avoiding these people. You should never have to pay for anything when dealing with a recruitment agency. remember it, they make their money by placing you. So as long as you've done your CV right and you've approached them in the right way, they're going to want to find you a job. That's how they make their money. It's also worth saying at this point, just a little thing about job-specific agencies. So if you are highly skilled in a specific area, for example, IT, there are recruitment agencies, obviously, that are designed and set up just to deal with that industry and that line of work. So try and find those out. If you have a specific qualification or a specific skill, try and see if there is a job agency or recruitment agency that specializes in that. They'll know a lot more about your industry. They'll know a lot more about the people looking for opportunities in that area. One thing to bear in mind is if you are unemployed, spread the net wide. Don't be afraid of sending everybody your CV. You can put it on all the internet website portals, PNet, Career Junction, Gumtree. You can find jobs on there using those. Use the newspapers, job mail. Obviously, we've already said use recruitment agencies. You've got nothing to lose. Go for it. Send out as much as possible in as many areas as possible and see what comes back to you. However, if you are already employed, things get a little bit different because you've got to bear in mind the time that it takes to do these things. You know, just to go through a recruitment agency, for example, you're at least going to have to go in once to meet the person you spoke to. Sometimes, if they're a junior in that organization, you may have to go in again and meet the senior consultant. Then, if you do get to the next stage with an interview with a company, you're going to have to take time to go and do that. So you're looking at maybe 3-4 separate interviews when you're looking for a job, and that's for each job. Well, I mean, obviously the recruitment agency will know you after the first meeting, but if you don't get that first job, you'll be going for more interviews for the second job. So you need to bear that in mind for time off work. A lot of us are in positions where it's not easy just to take, you know, half a day every week just to go and look for interviews. So applying for everything then becomes a little bit more of a risky prospect because, you know, you're at the mercy of what comes back to you, and obviously you can only take a certain amount of time off work. So find a good agency that you trust. Tell them your situation and explain to them. They all understand. They all know that people are working. And then obviously you're hopefully minimizing the amount of time you need to take from your job. Ooh, someone shouting at me. Can everybody make sure you're on mute? Thank you all. And good, let's go to the interviewing section. So when you're interviewing, first impressions count a lot. We've already spoken about that with the CV. People are going to look at your CV and they're going to make judgments about you, rightly or wrongly, based on things like that. And exactly the same when it comes to interviewing. The first employers will often make a decision about you.
Sorry,
about whether they like you. Ooh.
Sorry, Chief. Can I just ask Katlego to switch off your camera, please? Katlego, please switch off your camera. It affects the quality of the call. Katlego, can you hear me? Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you, Katlego. All right. So interviewing. As I was saying, people will make a decision about what they think of you in the opening 20, 30 seconds of meeting you. That might change during an interview, but quite often it doesn't. Quite often, if someone's made up their mind about something, that's how it stays. So you need to be thinking about what sort of impression you are giving from the very second that they lay eyes on you, which brings me to your appearance. If we move to the next slide. If you turn up at an interview looking like this, that gives a different impression about you regardless of what your skills are, than if you turn up looking like that. The next slide. We've gone back to the scruffy one. So you need to be ready and prepared. Your appearance is a big deal. It's going to make a massive difference to the way people think about you. And it doesn't matter what you say after that a lot of the time. If you turn up to an interview looking scruffy or with dirty nails or with tackies on instead of shoes, or, you know, depending on obviously the level of job you're going for, but it's very difficult to get that out of somebody's mind once they've seen that. So be very aware of what impression you are giving the people you are meeting. It's incredibly important. And it's very difficult to change somebody's mind once they've decided you are not the right person. Which leads me on to handshakes, which are becoming, obviously in today's environment of COVID, we're now just doing the elbow bump. It's very hard to get an elbow bump wrong. Try not to elbow anybody in the face while you're doing it. But it's very hard to get it wrong. But one assumes at some point we will move back to handshakes, the traditional form of meeting somebody. And there is nothing worse than having a limp-wristed person just flop their hand in yours when you go to shake their hands. And we understand you might be nervous and intimidated sometimes when meeting prospective employees, but try to make your handshake as firm as possible. Doesn't mean you need to try and crush everybody's hand bones like Donald Trump is famous for doing, but just a good, confident, firm handshake is really important. I hate the wet fish handshakes. It's one of my biggest bugbears. When I was interviewing people, if I got a fishy handshake, that was it. They were immediately done for me. It was no good. Have questions prepared. A lot of the time when we go to interviews, we feel like we are the one that is that's in the spotlight. It's a good idea to make, you know, you are also interviewing them. You know, that's the way you need to be looking at it. You are also interviewing them to see whether you want to work in their company. Because bear in mind that that person needs to fill this position with the best person possible. So they're also, you know, in a position where they need to fill the place. So the more you can try and find out that will help you, the better. You know, ask questions about the salary, ask questions about the working environment, ask questions about the benefits. But make sure you've thought about it in advance. Make sure you have a little list, not necessarily written down, but memorized, of things that you specifically want to ask, either in general about the job or specifically about the company. It's really important, and it might just be the one thing that makes you stand out a little bit. And talking about standing out, do research. We move to the next slide. Do some research on the company. And it's very simple these days to research a company. Go to their website, have a proper look around their website. Don't just sort of scan the homepage and sort of vaguely find out what they do. Have a proper look around. Try and find things like their, go to their newsletter pages. Go to any financial pages that you can find about them. A good way to distance yourself from other people in an interview is dropping bits of information that you found during your research. That on a subconscious level, the employer will be saying, "Oh, that's interesting. They found out about it." You know, they will be impressed that you've taken the time to find out about it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, you know, yes, I know that your company was founded in 1972, and you know. It needs to be a little bit more subtle than that. But if you can drop in little bits of information that you've found and things that the company have done that were impressive and drop them into the conversation, you're immediately on a subconscious level distancing yourself from everybody else. Obviously, that has to be used with all the other bits and pieces that they're looking for, but it's a very good way. If they've got two people that have got the same qualifications, the same skill sets, the same job experience, it might be that little extra bit of knowledge that you dropped in that pushes you over the edge in their minds. And it's not very difficult to do. It's really just about, you know, Googling the name and having a look at different pages and looking at the website properly. And it can be very, very, very effective. Okay. Finally, what I want to do is talk to you about confidence. Confidence is a bit of a weird one. As an actor and a drama teacher, this is what I spend a lot of my time training people, and I do corporate training and help, you know, people get more confident on the phone and speak with a more demanding and confident manner. However, it's not something you're going to get in the next 5 or 6 minutes, but it's really just to give you some ideas and some thoughts about how to make yourself seem a bit more confident. Your voice. People don't want to struggle. People don't want to work hard. If you are talking to someone and you're talking in a very quiet voice, and they're having to lean in and listen and really work hard to listen to what you're saying, it immediately puts a sort of an idea about you in their minds that it may not be helpful. Your voice is, again, the same with your appearance. When you start talking, the more confident you sound about yourself and the things that you're saying, the easier it is for them to talk to you and the easier it is for them to believe in you. And it can be simple things, you know, don't whisper. Make sure your voice is nice and clear. Make sure you're speaking in an articulate manner. Make sure that you have a good, firm idea of what you're going to say about yourself. And this can even be taken down to practicing things, you know, so practice in the mirror. You know some of the questions you're going to get asked. You're going to get asked things like, you know, tell me about your last job, or what was one of the things that you achieved at your last job. Think about that and think about how you're going to answer, so that when you come to answer it, your voice is trained in knowing what to say, and it makes you come across more confident. You know, if you're sat there going, well, I had to, then it gives across a certain persona, and it gives across a certain thing that people sets off alarm bells. Movement and your body. Be aware of how you sit. Be aware of how you stand. You know, if you are slumped over while you're talking to somebody, it gives a very different impression to someone who's sat up straight and leaning forward and is interested. You know, if you're sat back like this during the whole interview with your arms crossed, that might just be how you sit, but it comes across as a very specific thing. It comes across as in a very specific way. And the more control you have over that, the better it is, and the better impression you can give to people. Which brings me to audience control. And when I say audience, I mean whoever you're talking to. You can control the conversation. This reverts back to a little bit about what I was talking about before, about it shouldn't just be you in the spotlight. You are interviewing the company to see if you want to work for them as much as they are interviewing you to see if they want you to work for them. And that kind of makes the employer feel better about the whole thing. They feel like you're more interested. And you can control that by answering succinctly, being prepared, making sure that, like I say, you've rehearsed certain questions so that you've got a very, very clear, and by rehearsing, I don't mean necessarily learning everything that you're going to say so it just comes out as a monosyllabic diatribe, but making sure that you are giving yourself across in the best way possible. Interviewing is nerve-wracking, and I know that can be the case for most people. Doing anything in front of people can be nerve-wracking. There's no easy way of controlling nerves. What I would say is breathing is very important. And I know you're all saying, but we pretty much breathe all the time, Tim. When we do, but what happens when you get nervous is that your breathing tends to speed up. So if you can control that breathing, then what happens is it automatically relaxes you, brings your nerves down, makes you feel calmer. So deep breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. 5 or 6 big deep breaths before you go in is going to calm you down and give you a sense of calmness that you wouldn't have before. If you go in all nervous, you'll like shake when you hand over your paper or whatever. Just a few deep breaths before that makes everything feel a lot better. Good. 38 minutes. That's pretty much my time. Thank you very much for listening to me. Absolutely groundbreaking for everybody. But hopefully in this, there'll be something that you've thought about and can maybe change on your CV or think differently about when you go into. We'll take any questions now.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was very insightful. It was very mind-opening. I'm pretty sure the participants are also confident when it comes to job hunting, especially in these trying times. Right. I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Of course, just to open the floor. I have a curious one, right? My first question is, should I apply for a job even if I don't have the required experience?
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, it depends on what the job is and it depends on what the experience is. I wouldn't be applying for any brain surgery jobs if you've never been to medical school. However, if it's down as a, preferred qualification, then go for it. It might be, and again, it depends on your experience level within that job. If your experience level is fairly advanced and you have maybe other qualifications that can that work around what they're looking for, then absolutely go for it. At the end of the day, you've really got nothing to lose. All you're going to do is send a CV, and they're either not going to call you or they're going to call you. So what I would suggest is absolutely go for it. Just don't set all your hopes and dreams on it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Another question. Let me see. When is the best time to look for a job?
I mean, there's obviously certain times where it's going to be harder than others. People tend not to recruit over major holidays as intensely as other times. So, December, the back end of December over the Christmas period is probably going to be harder to pin people down for interviews and whatnot. Other than that, though, really, you kind of, as far as I know, there's no particular, this is definitely going to be the booming job. You should always do it in June or whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be, people leave whenever they leave, and when they leave, people are going to be looking to replace them. And really, it's about getting that timing right as it comes along. And look, it's not a quick process, as it can take especially if they're looking for a senior role, it can take a company 3 weeks, a month to choose somebody. And for senior roles, you might have to go in for 2, 3, 4 interviews with different board members and directors and etc. So in terms of when to do it, I would avoid big holidays. But other than that, I think, we tend to look for jobs when we know we need to find one,
Oh, definitely. That definitely makes sense. You don't want to be looking for a job over a holiday. Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, nobody's there, are they? So, you're going to have to wait until the beginning of January. You can submit your CV, but then just don't expect lots of calls until the 8th of January or the 9th of January, whatever.
Yes. I've got a question here from Janine. She says, do employers want to see your reasons for leaving on your CV?
Yeah, quite often. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. They do quite often. and it's often something that you can just put in amongst the work summary that you do. If it was a fixed term contract, obviously the difficulty of this is if you did leave under some problematic reasons, then you're going to need to be a little bit inventive of what you put. But often if it is just a case of the contract coming to an end or the company closing, those are the things that you can definitely put down, because what employers don't want to see, obviously, is lots and lots of different jobs and all leaving, because you couldn't get on with people or anything like that. So you've got to be careful what you put down. But yeah, certainly if it is for genuine reasons beyond your control, or even part of your control, if you just want more of a challenge, then that's absolutely fine. But yeah, just that can go in your career summary section.
Oh yes. That's a very helpful answer. I've got a question again from Zandi. Right, it's more like a follow-up from that previous question. She says, after the interview, is it wise to call back just to know the reason as why wasn't you called for the job post?
I suppose there's two schools of thought on that, really. It's useful to you to know. The best thing to do is, if you've got the interview through a recruitment agency, is check with them, because quite often they'll be told, the reasons the company went in whatever direction they went in. Bear in mind that, for one place, a person might be seeing 15, 20 people for that position. And what they don't want is 14 of them phoning back the next day saying, why didn't I get the job? So you've got to be a bit careful. You don't really want to be making other people's lives difficult. But if you've got the interview through a recruitment agency, certainly check with the agency, because it's useful for you. If it was something that you can change for your next interview, that's useful to know. So yeah, I would always suggest checking with the recruitment agency. They should have an idea, and let them check with the company rather than you. They'll already have an established contact at the company and a rapport with the company that you don't have. So it'll be much easier for the agency to find out than it would be for you to start trying to track people down. And you don't want to sound sort of, why didn't I get the job? Because there might be another opportunity with that company further down the line, and you don't want to spoil that by contacting them unnecessarily.
Yes. That's definitely helpful. You don't want to come across as a crybaby.
Exactly. Sometimes you've just got to take it on the chin and move on. Yes.
I've got another question. Thank you for a very insightful answer. Yeah. Live CID. Okay, the name. Live CID, can I please ask you to please post your name on the chat function, and also your email address. Also, real names help when we actually sending you the notes and the video after the presentation. So yeah, I like your question. Live CID, please drop your real name and your email address. Anyway, he says, thank you. I needed to know on a psychological level, does age come into question in these instances? I'm 21 and work for 4 companies. Yes?
Sorry.
Yes, you can carry on, Tim.
Yeah, look, as with anything, people have automatic prejudices and things that they look for, or things that they want in their heads when they're looking for people. And age is obviously one of those things. We shouldn't do. We all know we shouldn't, but we all do it. So when an employer puts out a job spec, yes, they need to make sure that they have qualifications and all the technical stuff in place. But on a subconscious level, they probably do have some idea of what age they're looking for. Not everybody. Some people are more open-minded than others, as we all know. But that is something that we will come across. And unfortunately, there's not a lot that you can control about that. So I'm certainly not going to say, no, it doesn't matter, because it will do for some people. However, what you can do is try and make sure you've got all the other bits in place so that hopefully that will offset anybody's preconceived conceptions of what they're looking for. So, for example, if they're in their head saying, we need someone over 30, but you go in and dazzle them because you've done all the research and you've gone in looking like $1 million, then you're looking to offset any preconceived ideas the employer has.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's very, very helpful. That's a very insightful answer, team. Let me see. Guys, you can keep your questions coming on the chat function. Let me see another question. Okay, I have one here. Tim, do you think it's advisable to apply for a job in person?
Probably not. Unless they've specifically told you to do that, no one's going to take time in that minute that you happen to be there to say, oh, brilliant, yes, come in, let's sit down. It's just not going to happen. You know, we're dealing with busy people. We're dealing with people who have to set up interviews. It may not just be one person that's interviewing you. They might have to organize it with another director of the company. So I would advise that that's probably not the best way of doing it, unless it specifically says be here at this time with your CV. And I know some retail jobs sometimes do that, but generally speaking, you need to submit a CV and get invited to an interview. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting your time a lot of the time.
Oh, yes. That's definitely helpful. I hope it helps some of the participants to understand better. I sure know it will, right? Another question. How effective are cover letters? Is it necessary to have a cover letter? And what is a cover letter?
Okay, so a lot of people, this is what I was talking about before. A cover letter is essentially the personal statement on your CV extended to a sheet of A4. Quite honestly, no one's going to read it. Okay. So I would distill whatever your cover letter says to 5 lines and use that in your personal statement on your CV. You've always got to remember that, you know, when I was recruiting for sales jobs, I would get maybe 30, 40 CVs at a time. Now, I'm not going to read an A4 page of cover letter for every single CV. That would literally be all I would do. I would literally look at what they've done before, look at their experience, look at their education, and if that fit the bill, then I'd get them in. Maybe the people that I was then interviewing, I might have a quick look, but even then I'm going to take all the important stuff off other bits of the CV anyway. So their previous jobs or their university or whatever. So no, a long drawn out cover letter is probably not necessary.
Okay. Hello, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that insightful answer. I've got another question from Mzaifani Mkize, right? He says he's got, let's assume you have been in logistics industry for 3 years, right? Without any qualification. But you know everything that's going on there. And now that you have a qualification and you apply for a job and they need 2 years experience, is it okay to tell them what you know?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. Yeah, that experience doesn't go away. That experience doesn't become null and void just because you now have the qualification. The two things work hand in hand. And that's why, you know, people still go for new qualifications all the way through their careers, because you're adding to your knowledge base and you're adding to things you can put on your CV, for example. So no, absolutely, the experience doesn't start from when you get your qualification. It all works, or it should just all work hand in hand and sort of complement each other, really.
Okay. Yes. That's definitely helpful as well. You know, a lot of people sometimes they go into, let's say, maybe try networking with other people to try and find a job. You know, how effective could that help, or is that a wise way to go, or what's your advice on that?
Again, I think it's important, and it can certainly help people. And networking, as we all know, is a viable way of meeting lots of people and putting your personality out there. However, it's going to be very, very specific. It shouldn't just be the only thing you do. It might be something that you're more doing. Oh, I'm thinking about moving. Maybe it's time just to sort of, I'm not desperate to move, but I'm thinking about changing. Let me drop some ideas with people I know that are in this industry or whatever. And then if they know you and they think anything comes up, they might have you in their minds then. However, if you are, you know, unemployed and looking for a job, it shouldn't be the only thing you are doing. It's like everything, isn't it? You've got to take little bits of everything and put them together and mix it up and see what you get. So I'm by no means saying networking isn't important. I think it genuinely is, and genuinely can get people, you know, good positions and good interviews, even put you ahead of the line. But it shouldn't just be the only thing you do if you're desperately looking for work.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely means you cannot rely on family and friends only to help you get a job. Yeah, I get you.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, it brings us back to the thing we were talking about before about, you know, if you are currently unemployed, you need to cast the net wide and try everything. If you are already employed and you're maybe thinking about changing, then things like networking and smaller, more considered approaches to finding other work might be the better option. So it depends on the situation.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. You know? I've got a question here. Let me see. It's a very interesting one, this one. Come on. Oh yeah. Somebody's asking about age, right? They recently got retrenched at age 56. Is there an age limit to job hunting or maybe getting employed lately?
No, there's no age limit that I know of, and it's kind of as I said before, isn't it? When we were talking about the 21-year-old, it's just at the opposite extreme. Of course, there's no age limit. However, you are going to be dealing with people's preconceptions and their own thoughts about what they are looking for, rightly or wrongly. And the only way to combat that is to try and have everything else so perfect when you are going for interviews that they have to look past it. And remember, that doesn't start with the job interview. That starts with the recruitment agency. You know, if you go into recruitment agency a little bit half-hearted and a little bit, you know, saving yourself for the job interview, you may never get that job interview. You've got to be as dynamic and as self-assured in the recruitment agency meetings as you do all the way down the line. because otherwise the recruitment agency, you're not going to get past that first hurdle. So in answer to this question, as far as I know, that it's illegal to have an age limit on it, as far as I know, probably up until retirement age, certainly. However, you are going to be dealing with people's preconceptions and people's subconscious biases. And
Yes.
the only way to get past that is to be so dynamic and so good at everything that you're doing that they have to look past it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, that's definitely participant also got that. All right. I've got another question, right? Let's say you work for a company as a health and safety rep, right? And then you apply for a job as a safety officer. Even they are not advertising the vacant position. Okay. I don't think I understand this carefully.
Then I don't either, Tabo.
Yeah. So can I please ask Live CID to please rephrase the question on the chat function again, right? Okay. Another one.
Was this the one, the safety officer one from Wilbert?
Pardon?
Sorry, was that the safety officer one from Wilbert?
Yeah, the safety officer one.
Okay, I think I understand what they're saying. They're saying the company doesn't have that department or that specific job role available, or that they don't have it at all, and they're asking, can they apply for it? Look, speak to whoever runs that department. What can hurt? If you're already working at the company, you're probably going to have as much contact with them as possible. Speak to whoever sorts that out. You need to be able to put together a plan to say, this is why I think you need this department. This is why I think this job role should be part of your company. And you need to speak to whoever sorts that out. You're probably going to have to go up the food chain a little bit periodically, start off with the manager and then have them take it to the next levels. But there's absolutely no harm in asking. So I would say, yeah, just because that job doesn't exist, if you can put forward a case for it existing that is going to save the business money or make the business money, then people will want to know about that.
Okay, yes, that's definitely helpful. Thank you, Tim. I couldn't understand that first question, but yeah.
No worries.
Yes. There's another one. It's a long one, but I'm gonna try and keep it short because we're almost out of time. Actually, we've just run out of time. It's 12 o'clock on the dot right now. But just one last question, right?
Go for it.
A whole lot of companies deploy a work from home strategy lately. How can that affect being employed in future, considering that we're moving closer and closer to the fourth industrial revolution?
Yeah, it's a tough one. No one can deny that the times are difficult at the moment. Having a 6-month shutdown has not helped anyone. A lot of companies have had to retrench people, which means that legally they can't employ new people for a certain amount of time. There's no denying we're in a situation where it's not amazing for everybody. And I don't really have any answers, to be honest. I'd love to be able to say, oh, well, it's all going to be fine next year, because nobody really knows yet. Yeah. What I can say is that the better you package yourself to give yourself the best opportunities you can, the more chances you will have, regardless of what the situation is. If you go on to, people are still employing. If you go on to PNet or those job sites, there are jobs still being put up. Recruitment agencies are still running. They've not all closed down, and there's a reason for that. And the reason is that the opportunities are there. You just got to make sure that you are in a position to fight for them as best as possible with everybody else that's fighting for them. As for the fourth revolution, quite honestly, I don't know enough about it to be to comment in any way that would be helpful. I don't think. But look, we're going to be, people are going to be recruiting people for a long time. So hopefully we can all find jobs and be happy.
Oh yes. Thank you for a very insightful topic, Tim. It was quite amazing. I've learned a lot. I trust the participants have also learned quite a lot as well. It's a.
I can see at least one person found the session useful, so that's good.
Yeah. Yes. Just for a last question, a last request to the participants, please go to www.menti.com and use the code 9840687. Did you find the session useful? Unfortunately, we've ended out of time. Thank you guys for participating. Who just posted their email on the chat function. You'll definitely be getting the video and a copy of the notes. Our next session is on the 28th. The 28th of October. The topic is called Be Smart. So it's all about getting more done in less time. Thank you to everybody who participated today. A special thank you to Tim. We really appreciate it from the Academy of York team. And thank you to every one of our participants. It's been a very informative and insightful session today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Kim and Tim. I can see that there's been a lot of thank yous in the chat there, in the chat box. I think people didn't get to actually say how useful this webinar was. I can certainly tell you it was very useful, considering we've received so many questions. People were engaged, and it was really, really what they wanted. Those questions where you are not sure how to spruce up your CV, what's important, what's not, because I think most of our students are looking forward to getting jobs out there, or to get an important skill in order to enter the job market. Certainly very insightful. Thank you so much, Tim, for the wonderful webinar.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I see there's someone who wants to say something. Please, we've run out of time at the moment. Please, can you post your question on the chat, or you can send us an email. You can send an email to info@aoi.co.za, or you can contact us if you need more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamu. Don't forget, guys, the next session on the 28th of October from 11 to 12. Thank you very much.
Jerusalema, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami. Jerusalema, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, Jerusalema, ikhaya lami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami. Jerusalema, ikhaya lami.